One whistled Wagner while selecting children for the gas chamber. The other ran a hidden compound in occupied China that infected entire villages with plague. Both were doctors. Both were officers. Both committed crimes that should have hanged them at Nuremberg or Tokyo. Neither one of them was ever convicted of anything. Tonight, Josef Mengele and Shirō Ishii, the two most notorious war criminals in medical history. Two completely different programs of organized atrocity. One question: who was truly more dangerous? Welcome back to Evil vs. Evil, Monsters of History. This is episode 18. Born in Günzburg, Germany in 1911, Josef Mengele was the eldest of three sons of a wealthy manufacturer of farm equipment. The Mengele family was Catholic, conservative, and locally prominent. Their factory employed hundreds of workers in the town. Josef was a small, neat, intelligent boy who excelled in school and was, by every contemporary account, polite and self-contained. He studied at the universities of Munich, Vienna, and Bonn, earning a doctorate in physical anthropology in 1935 and a doctorate in medicine in 1938. His doctoral thesis examined the racial differences in lower jaw structure. He had already joined the Nazi Party. He joined the SS in 1938 with serial number 317,885. He served as a combat medic on the Eastern Front, was wounded in 1942, and decorated with the Iron Cross for pulling two German soldiers from a burning tank. In May 1943, Mengele was reassigned. He arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau in occupied Poland to serve as the camp doctor for the Gypsy section, then later for the entire complex. He was 32 years old. He would spend the next 21 months conducting some of the most infamous medical experiments in human history. He stood on the train platform when each new transport arrived, often in white gloves, often whistling Wagner. He personally performed the selections, pointing left or right with a small flick of his finger. Left meant immediate gassing. Right meant the work camp, which meant slow death. He sent approximately 400,000 people to their deaths from that platform. His research focused on twins. He had nearly 1,500 pairs brought to him from the arriving transports, kept in a separate barracks, and used as subjects. He injected dye into their eyes, attempting to change brown eyes to blue. He surgically attached siblings to each other in an attempt to create artificial conjoined twins. He performed unanesthetized surgeries. He removed organs. He killed pairs simultaneously by injecting chloroform directly into their hearts, so he could perform comparative autopsies on identical bodies. Of his 1,500 sets of twins, fewer than 200 survived the war. He worked on dwarfs, on people with congenital deformities, on pregnant women, and on Jewish men he suspected of carrying particular hereditary traits. He sent organ samples, severed limbs, and full skeletons to a research institute in Berlin for further study. In January 1945, with the Soviet army closing in, Mengele fled Auschwitz with his research notes. He hid in a Bavarian village, then escaped to Italy, then in 1949 to Argentina, where he lived openly under his own name for over a decade. He moved to Paraguay in 1959, then to Brazil. He suffered a stroke while swimming in the surf at the Bertioga Beach Resort on February 7th, 1979, drowned, and was buried under a false name. His remains were exhumed and identified by DNA in 1985. He died at 67, unprosecuted, undisturbed. That was Josef Mengele, the doctor who turned a death camp into his personal laboratory. Born in Chiyoda-mura, Japan, in 1892, Shirō Ishii was the fourth son of a relatively prosperous landowning family in Chiba Prefecture, 80 miles east of Tokyo. He was a brilliant, ambitious, eccentric boy who slept only 4 hours a night, took cold baths in winter, and refused most ordinary food. He worshipped his ancestors. He worshipped the emperor. He believed Japan was destined to rule Asia. He studied medicine at Kyoto Imperial University, the second most prestigious medical school in Japan, graduating in 1920. He joined the Imperial Japanese Army Medical Corps. He earned a doctorate in microbiology in 1927 and spent the next 2 years traveling abroad in Europe and the United States, studying public health programs in over 20 countries. He returned to Japan convinced of one thing: Japan needed its own biological weapons program. He was given one. In 1936, with the personal authorization of Emperor Hirohito and a budget that would eventually rival the cost of a battleship, Ishii was sent to occupied Manchuria to establish a secret military research compound at Pingfang, near Harbin. It was officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. It was, in reality, the largest biological warfare program in human history. It was known by its postal code, Unit 731. For 9 years, from 1936 to 1945, Unit 731 conducted experiments on at least 3,000 human prisoners, mostly Chinese, but also Korean, Russian, Mongolian, and Allied prisoners of war. The prisoners were referred to as Maruda, meaning logs, because the official cover story for the facility was that it was a lumber mill. The experiments included vivisection without anesthesia, performed by hand on living subjects who were still conscious. Frostbite experiments involved freezing limbs in sub-zero temperatures and then thawing them with various methods to study tissue damage. Pressure chambers were used to determine how much atmospheric pressure a human body could withstand before the eyes were forced from the skull. Pregnant women were dissected to study the fetus inside. Children were infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and syphilis to track the progression of the diseases. But Unit 731's true purpose was not laboratory research. It was field deployment. Ishii's program developed and used biological weapons against Chinese civilians on a massive scale. Plague-infected fleas were dropped from planes over Chinese cities. Cholera was introduced into water supplies. Anthrax bombs were tested on villages. Estimates of the dead from Unit 731's deployed biological warfare range from 200,000 to over 300,000 Chinese civilians. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, Ishii ordered the entire Pingfang compound destroyed. The surviving prisoners were killed. The buildings were dynamited. He returned to Japan and waited. He did not wait long. American military intelligence, eager to obtain his research data before the Soviets could, offered Ishii and his senior staff complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for full disclosure of their findings. He accepted within days. The deal was approved at the highest levels of the United States government. None of it was made public for decades. He spent the rest of his life as a free man in Japan, occasionally lecturing at medical schools, occasionally consulting for the United States military, never once acknowledging or apologizing for what had happened at Pingfang. He died of throat cancer on October 9th, 1959, in his own bed, at the age of 67. That was Shirō Ishii, the general who weaponized disease and traded the evidence for his freedom. Now, let us put these two doctors side by side. Category 1. Body count. Mengele personally killed several thousand experimental subjects and sent 400,000 more to the gas chambers through selections. Ishii's Unit 731 killed 3,000 experimental subjects directly and an estimated 200 to 300,000 civilians through deployed biological warfare. The edge in total dead is Ishii. The edge in direct personal selection is Mengele. Category 2. Scale of operation. Mengele was one doctor in a single camp among many. Ishii was a lieutenant general commanding a compound of over 3,000 researchers, technicians, and military staff, plus a network of branch facilities across occupied Asia. The edge is Ishii. Category 3. Personal cruelty. Mengele was famous for the intimacy of his cruelty. He whistled while he worked. He brought candy to the children he was about to dissect. Ishii was a manager. He did not perform the experiments himself in his later years. He authorized them. He read the reports. The edge in pure personal sadism is Mengele. Category 4. Accountability. Mengele was never tried. He died on a Brazilian beach, free and unpunished. Ishii was never tried. He died in his bed in Tokyo, free and unpunished. Both received complete impunity. Call this category a tie. Category 5. Long-term scientific impact. Mengele's research was junk pseudoscience driven by Nazi racial theory. Almost none of it produced usable data. Ishii's research, however barbaric, included real epidemiological findings about plague, cholera, and frostbite that the United States military quietly studied for decades. The edge, horribly, is Ishii. So the category split 3-1 with one tie in favor of Ishii. But categories do not capture everything. Here is the wild card. What if they had served in each other's programs? Mengele in Manchuria would have been an embarrassment to Ishii. He was too theatrical, too obsessed with twins, too undisciplined for the bureaucratic horror Ishii had built. He would have been transferred within a year. Now imagine Ishii at Auschwitz. The Nazi camp system, vast as it was not engineered for biological warfare research. Ishii would have demanded resources the SS could not provide. He might have run a smaller, but actually scientifically functional, weapons program inside the German camp system, and the world might have faced a Nazi-Japanese biological weapons threat that did not historically exist. Each man fit his country's specific style of evil. The verdict. By the categories, Shirō Ishii wins. He oversaw more deaths, ran a larger operation, and produced research that arguably influenced military medicine for decades. He was the more dangerous war criminal of the two. But here is the part that should disturb you. Mengele has become the international face of medical evil. Books are written about him. Films are made about him. Every Western child who learns about the Holocaust learns his name. Ishii is essentially unknown outside East Asia. He killed at least as many people. He ran a far larger operation. And because his crimes targeted Asians and were covered up by his American conquerors, he has been quietly erased from the global memory of 20th century atrocity. Mengele was the face. Ishii was the system. The winner is Ishii. The one we never let history forget is Mengele. Next episode, Attila the Hun versus Julius Caesar. Two of the most feared warlords in classical history. One sacked Rome's allies and made emperors tremble at the sound of his name. The other became Rome itself.